Hello, welcome to Tea with Mali. Today we have Tom Coyle. He's the founder of Adventures in Leadership as well as Self Solutions. Thank you for being with us today, Tom.
Thank you, Melly. It's a pleasure to be here.
I also forgot to mention that you're an author, so we're going to actually talk about that first because we want to make sure that people understand your passions, because this show is all about passion and purpose, and it does relate to the work that you do, but in a very unique way. So talk about your passion for history and this book that you decided to write.
Well, thanks, Molly. And one thing about history is there's so many lessons you can gain from this. And I look at history as an experienced teacher, if you will. Like, we always look for mentors and people to follow. Well, with history, you have a wealth of experience, people who have gone before you, who you can learn from their mistakes, what they did wrong, what they did right. And not everything's necessarily applicable, but you can find things that you can apply in your life. And last summer was the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg. And so I took a segment that was supposed to be part of a larger book and just took the segment and came up with a book called Leadership Lessons from the Battle of Gettysburg. And it looks on just key lessons people can apply in daily life. So for instance, communication lessons, how to communicate guidance. In one of the famous parts of the battle, Robert E. Lee went to General Ewell and said, "Take that hill if practicable," an old style way of saying if practical. Well, what Lee really wanted was Ewell to take the hill at all costs. What happened? Ewell rode over, looked at the hill. His men had been fighting all day, and he said, it's going to get dark soon. I don't really have a good sense of where all my men are. You know what? I'll just hold off for right now. Well, Lee was furious. So the big learning point there is, if you want something done, clearly state it. And if you defer to someone to make their own choice, you have to live with whatever choice that person makes. And another important lesson, how do you speak truth to power? Of course, one of the most decisive aspects of Gettysburg was Pickett's charge. And General Longstreet several times was trying to tell Lee, hey, I think this is a bad idea. So that's something I think all of us have been through, is when you have a boss who wants to do something and you know in your heart of hearts, or believe in your heart of hearts, that it's a bad idea. And Robert E. Lee has had quite a reputation as a general. So you disagree with Robert E. Lee, that's a hard person to disagree with. And so these are just lessons that I outline for the reader to then see, well, how did these people handle this dilemma? Right. And then what can they learn from that?
So in the book itself, talk about the format of the book so people can follow it. Is it really taking parts of history and then basically being able to kind of condense the lessons that people can gain from the history? Absolutely.
How it starts is there's a little bit of history, and I use history more as the backdrop. I'm not trying to teach history. There's plenty of books that do that. Right. So I give enough of the battle just so that the reader can understand what's going on here. So then what I've got is each chapter is a lesson. Maybe it's leadership communication, giving guidance, how to disagree with authority. And then it sets the backdrop. This is the situation, this particular leader who was the focus of that chapter. This is what they were going through. This is it. Now that I'm taking it back, then it just sort of leads them, what would you do in this situation? And now actually I teach from the book as well. I take people to the battlefield. And that's also part of my summer program, which we'll talk about a little bit.
Exactly.
We go there, stand in the spots where these key leaders were, where Lee was, where Longstreet was, and then get to see the battlefield from their perspective, understand the challenges and the decision-making process they had to make, and also the fact, just like what we face today, you have to make decisions with basically making an assessment. You don't know what the future is going to hold, so you have to make the best guess with incomplete information.
Wow. Where did your love for history? I mean, just listening to you, it's kind of like you just, show up, right? And it's all this knowledge that you've gained. Did that come when you were a child, or over time did you start to really study it?
It really came when I was a kid. Well, more specifically, I've always been very goal-oriented. And when I was in 7th grade, I had this teacher, his name was Rufus McGough, and we had this world history class, and he'd traveled to over 200 countries, and part of our lesson would just see slideshows from what he's showing us. And then he also focused on current events. And so tying in current events, and a lot of things were going on. You had basically apartheid was coming down, and we were only a few years away from the Berlin Wall from tipping over. And so he started looking at these various things going on in the world and then tying them to history that we're actually studying. And like, well, this is just almost like we read last night about Sumeria, or whatever ancient civilization you want to talk about, or even more contemporary, pre-World War II, intra-war period type of stuff. And so I realized then there's so many parallels of what's happening today and what happened in the past. And the more things change, the more things really are the same.
So now leadership. How did you move into the world of leadership? Because you started an organization called Adventures in Leadership, but prior to that, you had your own path, career path that led you to really focus on the importance of leadership and leadership skills. So can you share a little bit about your background and how you got here?
Absolutely. Well, I graduated West Point in 1997, and I served 7 years in the Army in the 101st Airborne Division and 3rd Infantry Division. And then I went over to the Foreign Service, where I spent some time there, and I worked in Afghanistan and Bosnia. So, and one thing about my travel, and I've been to a lot of countries as well, and my wife Isabel, who's a co-founder of Adventures in Leadership, we've, between the two of us, traveled to like 80-some countries. And that's why I look at cross-cultural communication aspect. How does other people see the world? Right. And so many times I see this when, and it's not just Americans, we're not the only ones who have this problem, but when you go overseas, you can't understand why they don't have the same perspective you do. And so it's a key lesson. And of course, perspectives change. Could be maybe you're from California and you're in New York. There's like an East Coast way of doing things. There's a West Coast way of doing things. And so as I was going in there, and I've always found myself mentoring people. People would say, hey, when I was in the Foreign Service, hey, I've got this boss, and, how would you deal with this? And Isabel sort of, prodded me, but you're really good at this. You should do something with this as a business. And then at that point, I was also dabbling in financial stuff, basically soliciting for financial companies and finding clients. And ironically, that's when I met you, because you were on a similar path working with a financial company.
Exactly.
But you found that really wasn't where your passion was.
Right. And we talked a lot about that actually at that meeting.
Yes, we did. And one thing I couldn't do, I was into the finance thing because I was looking at the dollar signs, but I wasn't successful because the business model the companies I was working with they wanted me to find not people I wanted to help, like my mom, my dad, friends, and family. They wanted me to find already rich people and make them richer, which, there's people who love doing it. There's a market for that, but that's just not what I wanted to do. And so I just found myself not really succeeding because it wasn't something I believed in. And then coupled with that so I started dabbling with something about some kind of leadership mentoring thing, and then Isabel's mom saw this bullying on the bus incident. There was that YouTube video that went viral in 2012. Yes. And if you recall that, they were just abusing this elderly woman, verbally abusing her, and of course putting it on YouTube. And her mom said, you should work with young people. Coinciding with that, I just sat through a leadership class directed at mid-level managers. And my frustration was, this is something that somebody should have gotten when they were 23 or 24. By the time you're in your late 30s, early 40s, unless you're just that unique, self-aware person, you're not going to change who you are because you took a 3 or 4 day course. And so then that was it, young people, and I started getting involved in making high school students a big focus. And the reason the high school students, I'm exploring opportunities to go younger, but they're old enough to do some of the things I would like to do in terms of, I do a lot of hands-on leadership. It's not just sitting in a classroom. You get through a scenario, like this summer we'll take people to a team obstacle course, for instance, and they'll have some ambiguous scenarios they have to work through as a team to do. So it doesn't require anyone to be an athlete to do these things, but it does require working together as a team, and there is a physical element to that. And plus also high school students, I think they're also old enough where they have to care because they start thinking about college applications, and all of a sudden the future becomes a little bit more reality. Mm-hmm.
So how did you and Isabel, when you were sitting down and doing this thing called brainstorming, and mind mapping your business model and your business plan, which, we can talk more about that because there are a lot of viewers that are interested or already starting a business. And the concept of brainstorming is really hashing out, number one, what you love and what you're good at, like bringing those two things together. And number two, what kind of offerings are going to make sense for, number one, keeping you interested in it because it's your baby, it's your business now, and two, bringing your unique skill set so that you can actually benefit others. How did you guys go about figuring out what kinds of programs you were going to offer? I mean, your mother inspired this concept of youth, but then how did you come up with programs that would resonate with youth?
Well, part of that is, I think, youth, well, not just youth, but anybody, you need to have them engaged. And sitting in a classroom just lecturing on a topic is not something that people are going to get engaged. I personally, and a lot of it's based on my own personal experience, how do I receive information? I learn by doing something, and just listening to someone talk about something doesn't really help me. And a lot of leadership classes, it's either someone who's more of a motivational speaker who says a lot of cool stuff about what they did in their life, but then you leave initially inspired, but saying, okay, now what am I supposed to do with this? Or you write down a bunch of notes, put it in your notebook, set the notebook aside, you never look at it again. And so I wanted to do something that was interesting, challenging, and something they could actually see. A lot of people, when you say, this is a bad way to lead people by micromanaging, let's say, or not, and everyone is going to nod, oh yeah, that's not me, I don't do that. But then when you put them in a situation, they actually might see themselves or find, and that's why, that they are in fact doing that. And so that's what the thing is so the two key elements it had to have was it had to be active. There had to be some kind of activity-based thing where we're doing hands-on leadership scenarios where each student rotates being in charge. And then the second part of it is the review process. After it's complete, the leader talks about what the challenge was, how they approached the problem, and then he or she can say, well, this is what I thought I did well, this is what I thought I need to work on. And then the students participating add their feedback in terms of what they thought this person did or didn't do. And then also what they might have done if they were the person in charge of that exercise.
Wow. So you've got them engaged. You're now having a process of review. What are some of the things that some of the participants and people who have gone through the program said about their success, and what do you find their key learnings are when they come through?
Some of the biggest key learnings is how they communicate to people when they get a little bit of stress. Because I create the stress by, I'm not yelling and screaming, I'm not doing anything like that, but I'll add time stress. And sometimes people find themselves getting flustered, and so their guidance is not as clear as they thought it was in their head. And I think that's one of the biggest things people find is, some people think they're very clear in their guidance, but there's communication's a two-way street. It's what you said and what the other person heard. I mean, a funny example is just the other day, I know all these shortcuts to get around traffic, and so Isabel's trying to talk to me on the phone. Now, what's interesting is she's trying to get off 66 and figure out where to get off. Now, she knows exit numbers, but I associate it by street names. And so, again, I'm trying to tell her 50, but there's also an exit 50, and so it's creating confusion. And so that's the thing. So, okay, let me take a step back. What you need to do is, I'm looking for route 50. You're looking for, I'm not sure what exit number that is, but it's the first exit after you got on 66.
Right.
And then it was conveying that. And so I think that's one of the biggest things people find from that course. And also just the confidence building. They're going to do exercises, very ambiguous scenarios. We'll have to work together to, for instance, at this thing called nuclear waste, where they have to move this bucket full of eggs out of this circle without touching the bucket, but using only equipment they're given. And then something that initially feels daunting, but then they think, oh, I can do this. Or at the team ops, of course, there's this big tower they're going to have to scale together. And again, it's intimidating, but then the confidence they get from actually doing it. They come back thinking, and one comment I had from a student who did a preliminary test run for me from Texas, said, oh my God, I really felt like I could do anything after going through that course.
So how do you keep your courses or your programs creative, right? You've got to come up with all these leadership games and adventures, as you call it, adventures in leadership. How do you guys keep inspired to come up with something interesting all the time?
Well, that's a very good point. Now, in some ways, when I'm getting new students, it's easy. I can just use a lot of the same things over and over again. But of course, you want to keep the people who love your program engaged, and so you're looking for different challenges. For instance, one thing, it ended up not working out this year just because of some of the violence in Brazil, due to pre-World Cup and all things going on there. But we were going to take a group of people for spring break to Brazil, to the Amazon jungle, for leadership training and survival training.
Wow, I want to go.
And we initially had a whole lot of people who wanted to do it, and then it was like, whoa, this is a little concerning. Now, granted, where we were and where the violence was, I mean, putting it in perspective, that's like saying if someone was going to fly to the United States and said, oh my God, you're going to Washington? Well, be careful, because something happened to a guy in Detroit. Well, still, so I think, well, let's just, the World Cup, and there's been some problems, and even a week ago there was some riots. We decided, well, let's just hold off on that and do something that later. So we've got these trips we're offering, and then you actually planted a bug in my head about this right by Antietam. There's a little bed and breakfast place, which is a great staging area for some stuff, which
Absolutely.
We have yet to go out to, but I think that offers another program, a weekend retreat of some kind. And Luke, who's off camera right now, he's working with us this summer, is being a very valuable part. He just got done studying at the University of American University in Paris.
Okay.
There we go, now I got the right thing.
Okay.
And so he has his perspectives of studying abroad as a U.S. student, getting a different perspective there. And he had this great idea of going down to Yorktown. And so there's another battlefield. It's a bit different thing, but of course it's a different setting because we're near Williamsburg. And so always just looking for different things, different exercises, and just talking to people. And I found that people who've been my big backers have always been offering excellent solutions.
And do you find the feedback from, especially for the youth and focusing on the youth program, do they come up with some great ideas for you? Like, how do you get feedback from them? Because they go through the program, so they'll tell you what they like and what they don't like,
and
right?
That's a big part of it. I'm always constantly reviewing things. I always ask, what did you like least, and what would you change? What did you like best, and what would you change? What would you add that just wasn't even in the course? And so this will be a real big thing for the first. I've done some one-day things. I've done a lot of weekend programs, one-day programs. So this will be the first one-week program, and so I'm really excited about this.
Yeah. And so for that particular company or business, where do they find information? The website is Adventures in Leadership?
Right, but it's Adventures, the letter N, leadership.com.
Right.
And so that's the little tricky point, but adventuresinleadership.com. And you can also go to my LinkedIn profile. I'm Tom Coyle on LinkedIn or Facebook, and I have links to the company there.
Great. Now, talking about that company, you also have another company. You have founded another company called Self Solutions. What inspired you to launch that business, and how did that come about?
Well, the company was founded initially by, and I was brought on as a co-founder, but founded initially by Jim Fouts and Jim Hillman, two former Navy officers. And they were both, Jim had gone in the reserves, Jim Fouts, and then he was doing leadership training, management consulting, that type of thing, and he was brought back on active duty, and Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld was concerned about all these incidents happening aboard Navy ships. And so they wanted him to map out the entire Atlantic fleet. And so Jim were like, how are we going to do this? And so they came up with a software solution, cloud-based, where they could go out to these ships and everyone could take these surveys and they could then use analytics to map out the data. And what they found was there wasn't all these problems on every ship, it was 3 ships. And they also found in particular the USS George Washington was likely to have another safety incident very, very soon. And 2 months later, it had a major fire costing $14 million because a sailor was smoking in an unauthorized area next to an unauthorized fuel dump. And so what happens is a lot of these catastrophes are caused by a lot of little things just adding up at the wrong place at the wrong time. And then they said, well, there's application to this in the business world. And then Jim Fouts and I were speaking at the same conference at the Naval Academy. So the Naval Academy had a West Point grad come up there and give a talk on leadership. I was leading a breakout discussion. And then Jim and I met and we thought, well, there might be some synergy here. And so we brought our ideas together, especially on my leadership stuff, because what Jim thought is we could take the software. And one of the great things about the software is a company, when there's a problem, their first reaction is they have to do something. Well, let's give leadership training or let's give safety training. Well, what training do you need? And the analogy I use, I love sports analogies. You don't just give a quarterback training. Maybe you need to train him on footwork. Maybe the quarterback needs to work on the release. Maybe they need film study to understand how defenses react. So everything's very specific. Why not make it specific for a company? And the reason it's called self-solutions is because the solutions really are within. We help the company come up with their own solutions to things. Too many times they have to bring in some outside consultant who's saying the same thing that a foreman on the line's been saying for years. So it really helps CEOs. We like the window into the workplace. And one of Jim's favorite taglines is 2 things you never get when you get to the top: a bad meal and the truth. So we give them this insight for C-suite executives to find out what are the problems within the organization, and then then we help them develop custom solutions. And it's also a very positive thing. We can use this analytics to show that, because we monetize analytics, so here's where each problem, here's the dollar amounts it's costing your company. But we also use it in a positive sense, like, hey, these 2 people will be paired as mentors because you see this person as a rising star, and so these people will be perfectly matched for a mentor relationship. So we use it for things like that. And frankly, the next thing we're really excited about is we now are partnering with one of our labs down Johns Hopkins, which we are developing some software to predict and prevent sexual assault cases. And that's a major problem right now around the world. Absolutely. And really excited to be part of this. And I think that's what I like about both companies. It's really helping people and making a difference in solving problems.
Now, how did that particular software, the inspiration behind that, was there an experience that one of the founders had, or was it just a true passion or an interest to go in that direction to help it prevent sexual assault around the world?
Well, I think it was just a real passion because because we were looking at what other problem applications could we have. We went into this business. And as we were looking for clients, this community college had approached us. Well, we might be interested, but then we started realizing they had a sexual assault problem. And then Jim and I said, oh my God, this is perfect. This is exactly the kind of problem this software could solve. And then we were looking but there were some other shortcomings to our existing software. And then that's where we were introduced. We had some contacts who helped us, who were at Johns Hopkins, said there's this other software they were dealing with that wasn't used for anything close to that, but just the methodology of their software worked out very, very nicely. And so we said, oh my God, this is perfect. We can combine these 2 software architectures and come up with a program that could really make a difference in solving this problem.
And do you see taking this software, once it's fully developed and engaged in the market, using this as a model for other problems that you can solve?
Oh, absolutely.
Is that already in the
Well,
talks?
we have this whole list of problems, and so obviously what we're doing right now is, well, let's focus on something first. So where we're putting all of our energy for the next 6 months is on this sexual assault prevention analytics. Then once we've got the success with that, in fact, we're right now looking for universities to partner with at no cost to them, just to be a proof of concept of the software.
I hope people are listening to that.
I hope so. I mean, to me, it seems like an easy sell. Hey, university that has a problem, we're willing to do this for free and help us prove this concept.
Well, as I'm listening to you talk about all the different types of partnerships and the different type of programs, you're constantly being innovative, right? And I want to talk about this innovation. You know, inside your Ventures in Leadership, you're constantly thinking about ways in which to continue keeping your participants and your clients engaged. With Self Solutions, it's always about being innovative. How do we solve problems more efficiently and effectively? When you're thinking about innovation as a whole, how do people, what do you use? What strategies or tips do you use to keep yourself learning and intrigued by new things, and then taking action on that? Like you, for instance, you went and you collaborated with people because you were curious about something. You probably asked a lot of questions, because I've known you through the years. You asked a lot of questions, and it led you somewhere. So can you talk about innovation and how curiosity plays a toll in this?
I'm always a very curious individual, and I'm not sure if that's my contrarian nature or my curious nature that takes over, but when I hear something, I always want to find out, well, is that really so? So I don't just accept something as face value. I want to learn more about something. Like, for instance, I thought about Jim Faust, when he seemed like a good guy to work with, but I wanted to learn more about him. And the more I learned about him, I said, this is a perfect matchup for us. And then Jim did the same thing, did his due diligence on me, and found, yeah, that Tom's a great guy to partner with on this. And so Jim's CEO brought me on board, and he really liked my ideas, because I'm always having these ideas for marketing and how different markets we can approach and how we can use the software. And so I'm always looking at, what's next. And of course, you also have to make sure you have the plan to keep the other thing going, because you don't want things to drop either. But I just have this curious nature about me, where I'm always looking at the world, whether it's world affairs, which is also a passion of mine still, and just like, well, this is what someone's saying. Is that really so? And that's another thing which I'm trying to focus on with Ventures in Leadership and Self Solutions, because I'll give you an example. There was a recent article. It was published in NPR.com. And the headline was, "Software Developer Says Women Complain All the Time." I read the article, and the software developer said, well, my wife complains a lot. I'm sorry, it was his girlfriend. My girlfriend complains about this a lot, so I developed this app for this. Well, he doesn't say anything about women in general, or everybody's wife or his girlfriend. He's saying his girlfriend has this problem, so he did this. But then everyone's reacting to the headline. Oh, that's so sexist. And, well, hold on. You've now created a problem when there really wasn't a problem. And responsible people, like the editors of NPR, allowed this headline to go through there, which just, okay, maybe that gets people to read it, but then it's very misleading, because unfortunately people don't read the headlines. So that's what holds up Self Solutions. It's getting beneath the surface. Maybe the problem might appear to be this, but with go into the analytics, maybe it's something beyond what you think. In Ventures in Leadership, we look at where are the problems with kids? Let's get beyond what people say, and which goes back to another reason why I've started it, and I'll jump back to why I started, is that I think of kids, say Isabel and I want to have kids, we're talking about that, but when I look at it, I'm almost in fear of kids, what they have to go through for school today, and I say it's because this. Longtime friend of mine, his kid was in school. He's like, oh, my kid's on Ritalin, he's ADD. I'm like, he's not ADD. And I was talking to his kid, and we were on my grandfather's boat, and he was fascinated by the engine, all the detail about it. And I started talking to my son. I went back to him and said, I found out the problem. He doesn't have ADD. He's bored in class. Yes. And they found he was actually in a grade, even though he was in the right grade for his age, but he actually should have belonged in the grade higher. And when they moved him up, he needed to be challenged. And two things in my life two teachers in my life that influenced me early on. When I was in second grade, I had Mr. Dibb as a teacher, and in third grade, Mr. Johnson, male teachers. And I was really always good at math. So we had 40 minutes to solve this math problem, and I was done in about 20. So I'm doing what every boy that age would do. I'm starting to squirm. I'm starting to do this. Now today, I'm ADD and drugged up on Ritalin. Mr. Dibb and Mr. Johnson would be like, okay, Tom, go outside and run a few laps. Then I come back in, energy's burned off, and I'm ready to go. Now today, of course, mentioned that sort of teachers. Well, if I do that and a kid slips and falls, I'm going to get sued, or the school gets sued, or this or that, and all these other things. And so I wanted to do something that kind of helped people and look at different persona. I had a lot of different friends in high school. I was friends with the band people. I was in the band. I was friends with the jocks because I was an athlete. So it also created somewhat of a distrust among people. Well, where does this person fit in? And that's what I think is, we always try to fit things in somewhere, and that's my thing of challenging this. Whatever your passion is, my goal for Self Solutions and Adventure in Leadership is to challenge assumptions, challenge what people have told you is acceptable and not acceptable, what is so and what's not so, and also that we always have to find someone and put someone in some label or some box. Why? And Steve Jobs said in one of his speeches, the world that was created was designed by people no different than you and I. They just set the rules, set the standards. So why can't you go around there and make new rules and new standards?
Love that. And I also really appreciate what you're saying, because when we went back and you said, let me go back to the why, I think that every successful business that really is connecting to their consumers, their participants, whoever is really being inspired by your programs, the successful ones really do take it from that standpoint. Like, why am I doing this? What motivates me? What's my personal why? People talk about this all the time, right? Passion, purpose, motivation, the underlying why, and going deeper. And would you agree that everything that you do now, because you know that it's inspired by something that happened to you, it's a lot more in flow, right? When you make a decision, it's not this, oh my gosh, it's so painful to go and decide what to do. You sit back and you say, what would I have wanted or needed in my life that I didn't have, and now I have the opportunity to give. When we do the work that we do about mapping vision and mission, and you said it right now, this happened to me. I had these two mentors that really helped me, guided me, and many people don't. And now you're in the position to do that for others. I'd like to talk about this because we talk about entrepreneurship, we talk about passion, but really it's not just passion, it's that deeper why. So, and I think Isabel also has her own motivating factors, and I want to talk about her as well because, she inspired you to do this. She's also a partner in this, and I'd like to, since she's not here, talk about her motivating factors. So why is she doing this? Why does leadership matter to her, and why did she say, yeah, let's focus on the youth?
Well, leadership matters to her for the big picture, which she observes at work, and frankly, why there's so many leadership consultants out there. The fact is, leadership, something that should be easy, is made harder than it needs to be. Sometimes, and I think part of this is companies, and I'll tie this back to her specific organization. Companies have made the incentive thing to get the increased paycheck, you have to be a manager or leader. The fundamental problem is that not everybody has the personality or desire to be a manager or leader. And what ends up happening in an organization, someone who does not otherwise want to lead has to take a leadership role so that they get the increased paycheck. And then they're disastrous as managers. So going back to kind of this thing I learned in my life, the Army came up with this program, OPMS 21. Basically, it was a fancy way of how do we promote, not everybody's going to be a combat leader in the Army, but we need experts in all different areas. We need foreign area officers, we need professional logisticians, we need intelligence officers. So they created this process that after you were at a certain level, after you had your command time as a captain, where you're relatively junior, you could then branch off on these other specific tracks and still have successful careers and ride the top. So then it allowed people who really wanted to lead large Army formations and Army organizations to do that, and other people who want to do something more specialized to do that, and everyone can succeed. And now taking it back to Isabel's situation, a lot of people, she works with a lot of scientists at National Institute of Health, and you had people who were, they're very smart people, but they don't necessarily communicate well, they don't necessarily have a desire to lead, but the same concept, I have to be in charge now. And so she was always saying, well, why can't someone do this? I mean, hey, I want to, why can't they make this clear? Why can't people just state and end state the typical leadership problems that everyone faces? I mean, basically, what's the problem? What do you want to solve? What's the outcome look like? And she was in an organization going through change, and everyone says managing change is hard. My view is it's easy. If you communicate what change looks like. If you say, okay, we're going through some changes, and here's what change is going to look like when we're all done. Everyone buys into it. Everyone's excited about it. It's like, we're going through some change, just bear with us. Now everyone's fearful. What's happening? Am I going to get fired? Is my job going to exist? How do I fit in the new organization? That's far too often what happens. And Isabel was experiencing this firsthand, and she had this desire to make sure that other people didn't have to deal with this. And so that's a big portion of what she teaches in Adventure in Leadership. Also, Isabel, she was born here, but her family is from Bolivia. And so she really is an American dream success story. I mean, her parents, came to the country, and then her mom particularly didn't really speak the language very well. But they succeeded. They had 3 daughters who are all doing amazing work. The youngest daughter, Marcy's in a PhD program at Berkeley. Gabby was another sister. Her middle sister was a lawyer until recently. Now she just had a baby and she's enjoying being a stay-at-home mom. And Isabel working, all very successful daughters and all just very successful in what they were. Isabel selected in the Emerging Leaders Program, the youngest person selected in NIH's Emerging Leaders Program.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so she really was getting it, and she's really an up-and-comer and really understands leadership. And then she wanted to take and share her experience and lessons with others. And so we're talking about doing something, trying to work our schedule around, where the idea is she's going to present something on women in leadership.
I love it.
And then I'm going to be there to put the other spin on as the male perspective on things. Because what Isabel and I find out is sometimes people think that there's some of this tension between men and women in the workplace. It's created. It's not really there. It's because of misunderstanding that people might have. More of there's certain ways men communicate, there's certain ways women communicate, and there's certain ways men and women understand things. And so to help people understand that, hey, maybe there isn't a problem. And if there is a problem, there's a way to address it. But maybe a lot of times there's a problem when it's like any 2 people. How many times have you been in a miscommunication and you feel slighted when someone didn't mean that and you clarify? Well,
a few times a day.
Yeah, a few times a day, a minute, whatever. So that's the thing. And so Isabel really has a passion for this. And then again, young people, Isabel for the same reason. She sat through a leadership class, and you can't give leadership training to somebody who's in their 40s, in their 30s, unless they're very self-aware. You got to start right at the beginning, at the foundation. And when I went to West Point, every step of the way you learned leadership. As a freshman, you got to observe different styles. As a sophomore, you're in charge of 1 or 2 people, and you get more and more responsibility as you go up there. So by the time you're a lieutenant in the Army, you've had all this leadership experience. And Jim Faust, the CEO of Self Solutions, made a point that in the military, we teach leadership first, your job second. Everywhere else, it's you teach your job first, leadership second. And you might be good at your job, but not good as a leader. And so that's why Isabel, she really wants to help people be better leaders and be better communicators. And that's how she really wanted to get involved.
Well, you guys are quite active, and a lot of left side of the brain that happens with your work as well. But you also both of you have a very creative lifestyle as well, that lots of passions. I want to talk about that as well, because, to be a whole and interesting person wherever you are in your life, not just in business or in work, a lot of the outlet that you must have in order for you to feel kind of connected to yourself, right? It's not just work, work, work. You love music. Isabel's a dancer. So I want to talk about that. When you guys aren't working and when you want to have time to kind of reboot energetically, talk about your passions outside of work.
Well, one of the reasons we have brand new wooden floors in our house is so we can do flamenco shows. And actually, we did a show with you at Chef Tony's place.
That's right.
And Isabel was a dancing flamenco. I was playing percussion, and her friend Miguelito was doing the Spanish guitar.
Yes.
And so we've actually done collab shows together, and I've also done. She's also done things separate, and I've done my separate things with rock and roll and other bands. And
you didn't say what you do though. You're a percussionist, right?
I'm a percussionist, and I love rhythm. I love drums. There's a great photo of me on the website. I should have brought a copy of the photo here with me, playing with a group of Afghans.
That's awesome.
And I found music is one of the best ways to relate to people, whatever music you play. And I started taking drum lessons when I was 8 years old. My mom, again to her credit, she wanted me to learn piano, but I kept insisting on drums, and she made a statement she regrets to this day. If we buy these drums, you better practice. And 6 hours a day, me practicing and giving her migraines in the process, that she got her wish in spades. But I mean, as I tell both my sister and my brother, they play piano, and they still play occasionally at parties and such. But I tell my mom, see, I've got return on my investment because I've played professionally. And in December 2012, I played at the White House with my friend Mark Aaron James, who was part of a band I was with in Nashville. And Eric Halbig was our guitar player, and we were doing this, I was the percussionist for a songwriter's night. Fast forward, Mark's written songs for a lot of soundtracks. Liza Minnelli flew him out for a duet. in Milan. And Eric Halbig was with Thompson Square, performed at Jiffy Lube Live last summer. And so I mean, and then there's me in this whole mix. So they still let me hang around, which is pretty cool.
Right. So, and you traveled some, correct, with
Yes.
your music?
Yeah, I have. I've actually, I was actually on a tour. That was my one thing I wanted to check. Two things. I wanted to play somewhere really cool, so I checked off that box by playing at the White House. And they played the Bluebird Cafe, which of course Country Music Television has that live at the Bluebird. It's kind of a famous venue down in Nashville. So the other thing I wanted to do was I really wanted to play a tour. And so I went to, I did this tour. It was all along the East Coast. It was only weekends, so I could still work. But you know, you really see, unless you're the main person, you really see how unglamorous touring is when you're just trying to get yourself established. Because the record company did pay for the hotel room and that kind of thing, but it was basically, we had to drive to Boston, we had a Friday night gig, but then we had to turn around and come back Saturday morning because we weren't paying for that hotel room, so that's kind of a long drive for that. But it was fun, got to play with some musicians I never would have had a chance to interact with. Then when I was in Sarajevo, I was playing with a local jazz band, and we did shows in Croatia and other parts of the Balkans, got invited to embassy parties to play shows.
That's awesome.
And there was like, and we look at the rest of the band, wait, and who's this blonde guy with them? Same thing I was playing with that Afghan band. We'd play shows around Kabul and that kind of thing, and they're like, wait, how did you get in this?
I want to relate that. I want to relate music to leadership, and I want to relate music to communication, right? I mean, music is so universal. We know this. It's been tried and tested and true that when you have music, people come together. When you're traveling the world, and you know, in those days when you were in the military and you were traveling and you got a chance to create a spark, right? Something that was not about politics. What was that like? And when you look into the eyes of somebody who was in the field with you, maybe playing on your side of the team, but then you have somebody else who was on the other side of the team. How does that make you feel, being a musician and being in the midst of being able to unite people?
That feels great, and it really reinforces my belief that everyone thinks we're so different, but in so many ways we're all the same. And and that's why why I've been so grateful for my musical background, because it really helps find those commonalities. I mean, who doesn't like music? And you can sit there and look at some hardcore person very hostile to you, and then you'd be surprised when I start hearing, like in Afghanistan, hearing some kind of Afghan song, and I'm actually tapping correctly to the beat of that music. I'm like, wow, how do you know this? Oh, I mean, I hear it all the time. I'm a percussionist. It's just natural. I just like to learn beats and that kind of thing. And next thing you know, I'm sitting by the fire jamming with these guys who maybe, if not openly hostile, certainly were very, very resistant to opening up to me. And I think that just a long culture. I think there's so much unity there when you can do that. And you know, like my group in Bosnia, we were a mixture of ethnic Serbs, ethnic Bosnians, and a Croatian. And so, again, through those, they went through that very vicious civil war. But here was bringing together a group of people who otherwise were fighting each other not many years beforehand. And it's just such a, I almost can't describe it. It just feels so good when you have that connection. It's just like when you make that intimate connection with somebody, but you know, you're doing it through music in my case. And it's just that amazing connection you have, and the friends I've been able to connect with, and I've done so much traveling by myself. It's a great way to meet people. When I'm sitting in I met this guy, Rebazar. He is a Pakistani musician who had studied in Zagreb, who learned to play Irish music from a group of Croatians who studied in Ireland. And
wow.
when you hear him talk, he sounds like anyone from Pakistan, but when you sing, you close your eyes, you think you're listening to an Irishman.
Oh my gosh.
And then when he was playing a show, I was by myself in Croatia, and I was trying to find out what was going on there, and someone told me, hey, there's this friend of mine, he's doing this show, and got to link up, play some percussion with him, and I had a real good time, and now he's doing shows all over Islamabad and other parts of Pakistan. I think in, where was the other place he was playing at recently? Lahore, doing a show up there, and so very active in the music movement there. And again, that's just where he's using music to connect with people of Pakistan. There's a lot of tension in that country, and he's using music to try and unite people.
Right. Makes me really want to focus on, you know, creativity and music and arts in our programs that are being basically removed from the school system and such because we have budget issues, correct? And yet here I hear you talking about music and how it unites people, and how perhaps, you know, if we can inspire all the world leaders or anyone interested in running a business, even any leadership role, that they study some form of art. Because imagine if we had a bunch of creatives, a bunch of musicians who really use that power of community through through music, arts, creativity, I think it would be a different world.
It absolutely would be. And look at the late Steve Jobs. His big thing when he puts it together, he had this vision of very artistic in his design of the computers and the interface and the fonts and all that type of stuff that we now know from Apple. And it was his creativity that made Apple successful. It was his creativity that separated people. Why do I buy a Mac versus a PC versus a Dell? Well, why am I buying an iPhone versus a Samsung? I mean, it was that creativity that he brings to it. And Apple didn't necessarily have the first product. I mean, BlackBerry was the first smartphone, but Apple made it something. And it was the experience he relates through that creativity that makes people want it. And you look at that creativity, and Jim Fouts, my co-founder of Self Solutions, the CEO, he's a classical guitar player. And I find so many successful people have this artistic side to them that in today's schools, again, going back to why I want to work with young people, we're taking that away. And when we take away that creativity, then you really lose something. And in my professional life, taking it back when I was in the Foreign Service, a lot of my creative ways of solving problems occurred either while I was playing or just because of my idea of liking to create something. It just helps me think, taking a more traditional business-like problem set, but then having a creative look and using my creative side to analyze that problem, I come up with a very unique solution, which often gets rave reviews. So just having that artistic side helps you think differently, helps you really consider all options, and then also helps you challenge assumptions. When you create, you're doing your own thing. And like Jim loves to cook, and because every day you get to create something. With Self Solutions, it takes time for us to develop software, but every day you cook, you're creating something that's your own. And Isabel and I cook a lot. We combine a lot of recipes. We don't actually really use recipes per se. We just kind of well, we'll just do this, 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 and this, see what we come up with. But it's creating something in every little aspect. And the more creative you are, the more success you're going to have. And that leads you to challenging the status quo, looking at things from a unique perspective, then offering a unique solution. Because what really, the successful entrepreneurs of this world offered something unique, and their uniqueness came from creativity. And if you look at the top entrepreneurs, Sir Richard Branson, Steve Jobs, Ted Turner, they all had a very creative side to them. Ted Turner was a painter, and Richard Branson was really into poetry. And so you look at these types of things, the most successful people in the world are creative, and yet we're taking this away from the schools. There's a disconnect right there. We're taking away something that the most successful people on our planet have used to become successful.
Right. And that's why having programs like yours is so critical as well. A couple years ago, I launched my Unique Fireflies program, and the kids that signed up and their parents that signed up, it's amazing because they come in and they tell you things like, we don't have this at school. And all they wanted to do was dance. And all they wanted to do was paint. And all they wanted to do was just be able to express themselves in a unique way that mattered to them. Not all of them wanted to dance. Some of them wanted to paint when they were talking about what makes me unique. And I feel like that's kind of been muffled not only in the schools, but even as adults. Inside corporations, we don't have an avenue for ourselves. I was in corporate for many years. There's no creative expression. There's no programs. There's no personal development programs where you go to work and you have a place where you can express yourself beyond the role that you play inside the company. Right? And then you feel depleted because you're giving so much of yourself and you're not really feeding your soul or your spirit of the things that you love, and you go home and you have all these things that you have to do to survive, feed your family, and you just feel all the time disengaged because it's like, what's in it for me after a while? So, having that be a part of your program, not just for the youth, but inspiring people who are watching now, is what's inside a corporation now, whether you're the CEO of that corporation or whether you work inside the corporation of human resources, is there a creative outlet for all of the potential mega leaders inside your corporation that aren't stepping out because they really don't know what's in it for them and they don't know how they can contribute in a creative, unique way for themselves?
Well, and I do see some good news coming on the corporate front. The Motley Fool, headquartered here in Alexandria, Virginia, every first Friday of the month they have their Friday free-for-all, and we can come in there and learn about their culture. They're very proud of their corporate culture, and I went there, and I'll tell you what, it's a great organization. Basically, every quarter they talk to the employees. They get to submit what they want to work on, and then that if it gets approved, because of obviously funding is always a constraint, then they get to work on that type of thing. So they really personalize the experience for the employees. And I think the tech world's a little bit better about that than maybe some other industries. And but that's what they do. They look at things. Then they have rec rooms where people can relax and that kind of thing. And as when they built the rec room, one of the concerns was, well, everyone would be in the rec room not doing their work. And the CEO, Tom Garner, said, well, if that happens, we'll just fire them, and those who will use it the right way, their work will be, the reward will be increased productivity. And so I think there is a movement afoot trying to make things more individualized, because if you've got talented people, you don't want to see the most talented people leave, and that's something I see a lot on discussion boards on LinkedIn and Facebook. There's this thing about whether this is the reason or not, but for instance, very large bureaucratic can't move organizations, at some point the most creative people sometimes leave because they want to do things. And sometimes that's not necessarily a bad thing though, because there was two people there's one gentleman's name escapes me, but they'd asked him, he's really big in like audio technology. And they always asked him one time, how come he never sticks around and runs a company? He just gets an idea, starts it all up, then leaves. He said, well, because I'm terrible at dealing with people. I'm really good at coming up with an idea and getting it to market, getting investors interested, and then giving it to somebody else who knows how to run something. Right. And then Jack Welch, CEO of GE, who's renowned as one of the best CEOs ever, he's not a good entrepreneur. He's not someone who can come up with his own unique idea and turn it into a product and that kind of thing. But he's great to take an organization that already exists, like GE, and make it the best organization on the planet. So I think that self-discovery is so important. And there's no right answer. Are you that? And if you're more entrepreneurial, you're going to find yourself not in an organization very long. And like I was in the Army for 7 years and I left, Foreign Service, then leaving that and doing my own business. It's just that's a personality of mine, and that's just, I think maybe at one point I'll adventure in leadership and I'll decide I want to start something else, and I'll turn that over to somebody else and get the up and running and get a CEO to run that, and I'll go off and do something different. Right. And that's just my personality. Someone else just wants to run, and that's what they want to do, and rise up at a corporation, and that's fine too. And I think the best corporate example was a guy I was talking to. He was at one of the auto companies. I forgot which one. But anyway, he had this one employee who loved starting new projects, but now this guy's now working for him, and the big black mark on his record was that he likes to start things and never finish them. And he said, well, actually, think of it as he's like your serial entrepreneur. He likes to start something, and they're great programs. So what you need is to have people behind him to then implement it, and that's what he did. He basically let him have his idea, then once he developed it, brought other people on his team to then implement that idea, and let the guy go to the next idea. And his section was incredibly innovative. He got an award from the company CEO for his section. And he said, look, all I did was just use this person to where their talents were. And I think that's an important thing, whether you're in a large organization, smaller, what have you. There is room, and I say it's more for a corporate side, there is room to use people's talents to your advantage. We tend to get so rigid and we think, oh, well, maybe that won't work, but think creatively. In this case, he was in a very large automotive organization, not necessarily known for flexibility or speed of process, but he found a person who had a unique talent, which was coming up with an idea and getting the ball rolling. Then he found a solution. Well, this person can't finish those tasks, but these people are really good at they can't come up with ideas, but they're really good at taking an idea that's been established and running with it. So they're going to then manage it, let this person start the next project, and do something like that. And so we always look at creative ways to use our people. And if someone's not performing, why is it? I mean, the classic line from Office Space, when it's Peter here, he's a straight shooter, and Lumbergh's like, yeah, I have to disagree with you. No, we think the problem is you haven't been challenging enough.
Yeah, no, and it really is a point about understanding your own strengths, first of all, and being able to have the courage and bravery if you're inside an organization to really communicate that, right? To let people know around you what you're truly interested in doing, what you're good at. The example you gave is, I'm not good at that. I suck at being around people, but I'm great at this. So utilize me in the right way. Right. Are there any final thoughts or words of wisdom for those entrepreneurs, leaders out there who really, in your case, for instance, it took you a long time before you decided that you were going to create something on your own, kind of go out and start this business. Any final thoughts around if someone is out there saying, I really think it's time for me to start something on my own. I know my strengths. I know that I can give of my gifts and talents, but I'm scared. What would you say to them?
The best thing to do, what I always do this, and this is one of my big teaching points, and I stole this from Tim Ferriss, author of The 4-Hour Workweek. Write down your fears. When you have this fear like, okay, what if I lose all my money in this endeavor? What if this happens? And you're just letting it float out there, it's going to consume you like a cancer. When you write out the fear, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? Oh, then you write it out there, and you write one column is, these are your fears. These is how you overcome your fears. And then you know what you're going to do. And that's something I also learned from trading stocks, which I do a little bit of my own, is that I have my entry and exit strategy in place before I even buy a stock or short a stock. I know if it goes against me, I'm getting out when it meets this criteria. And I'm going to exit for profit when it meets this criteria. If it does not meet the criteria yet, I don't take action. So many people who try to get in trading, for instance, like let's say they've said when the stock gets to here, if it goes against me, I'm getting out. And the stock's going like this, panic, get out. But the stock goes then shoots right back up because they didn't stick with their criteria. So outline your fears. Second, it's never too early or never too late. You know, Matt Zuckerberg was an entrepreneur, never finished college. Steve Jobs, same kind of person. I'm someone who's been around for a while. I just had my 40th birthday in March. And you know, I've really, in the last couple of years, really laid the foundation where I'm doing this now. The founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken was retired in his late 60s when he came up with the idea of Kentucky Fried Chicken. The guy who did Moose Tracks Ice Cream, who was on CNBC's How I Made My Millions, was a 72-year-old retiree who came up with the idea. So it's never too late, it's never too early, and confront your fears, know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and know your market. Be the expert better than you. That's what you have to, whatever your idea is, you have to be the authoritative expert in your area. And if there's a lot of what appears to be on the surface, like say leadership training, there's lots of companies out there, you have to be ready to explain, why are you different? What do you offer that no one else is doing? What makes you better?
Awesome. So fascinating. I wish I had more time and we could keep going, but this was amazing. Thank you so much for all your insights. Lots of words of wisdom, lots of things for people to think about. I really appreciate you being here today with us. I've learned a lot just listening to you, and we'll continue this conversation off camera, but thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Melly. And I just wanted to say for the viewers out there, for Adventures in Leadership, once again, the website is www.adventuresn, as in the letter N, leadership.com. And if you want to learn more about Self Solutions, www.selfsolutions.com, and help your company understand what's really going on, give the top office manager, the C-suite executive, insight into your workplace. And if you're in a university interested in learning how to predict and prevent sexual assault and how you can participate in a free trial program, come visit us. Thank you for your time.
And with that, you did a great job there with that. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching Tea with Molly, and we will see you next time.